Good morning and welcome to Dubai. It is so good to be back here. The last time I was here, slightly different circumstances. I did fly my own car out to this wonderful country to experience the place for an entire month. I'm only out here for 2 weeks this time, hence not bringing the car, but there's plenty of opportunities to check out the car culture here. We're also out here during the Formula One, so we're going to be heading over to Abu Dhabi while we're out here. So we've got track days, we've got supercar meets, we've got car launches, we've got all sorts of things happening over the next few weeks. And this time, I actually have my own apartment in one of the most incredible locations. Please stay on for around about the middle of this video because I'm going to give you an apartment tour which has, the best view of Dubai. Oh, there's the Burj. I'm not going to give away too much of that just yet because I want to put some effort into that, and I'll introduce you to the apartment shortly. But right now I'm actually running a little bit late. I've got a meeting with a man from Koenigsegg at a very, very special car dealership. Let's hit it.
For the record, I'm done trying to make y'all comfortable. For the record, you ain't trying to grow, then it's done for you. For the record, lab on me going all the way. For the record, ain't trying to link, no time to waste. For the record, for the record, for the record, for the record, for the record. Been a little too nice for y'all. Now I gotta up price on y'all. Snake eyes on dice for y'all. Shoulders on ice for y'all. A6 all the hate. I won't get a ball today. Got lost in the ball and A's. I'm flipping the bars, I'm flipping the on record, off record. I still count wins when they got it on record.
Now, one of the coolest things about staying at the Maison Royale is that I've got access to a car and wonderful driver 24 hours of the day. Now, in true Dubai style, this isn't just any car. I've got access to a Mercedes G63. It's really awesome service.
For the record, I'm done trying to make y'all comfortable. For the record, you ain't trying to grow, then it's done for you.
And welcome to Alain Class Motors. Now, I've been to Dubai so many times. This is the first time that I've ever been here. No doubt if you guys are die-hard petrol heads, you've probably seen their content online, particularly on Instagram. They are famous for having, just at all times, the world's greatest supercars and evidently hypercars in their showroom. So before my meeting, I'm going to go check out some of these cars, obviously share them with you guys, and then we're going to get on the road to a very special event which is taking place this afternoon. So here we are at Alain Class Motors. I mean, I've been to some showrooms, but it's the caliber of everything that they've got in here. Nothing in here is normal. It's all unbelievably special. Now let's just start from the back. What we have here, casual LaFerrari sitting on this turntable. Interestingly, I'm always surprised at things like this. Now I know this might not seem the most exciting car in the showroom, but Portofino's in the UK actually haven't hit yet. I don't think customer cars have hit the road. We've got dealership demos, but I'm not sure if any customer Portofinos have hit yet. And yet here we are in Dubai, and there's already one for sale on the open market. It's amazing how fast things move here. And when I was referring to everything in here not being normal, seemingly a 911 Turbo S, but this is the exclusive series cars. They only made 500 of these worldwide. Now the power on these was upgraded to just shy of 600 horsepower. That's actually 599 brake horsepower. The paint on this car is exclusive to this car, so much so that even if you wanted to have a car from Porsche painted in a paint to sample color, they will not give you this exact color because it's exclusive to the Turbo S exclusive series. It's indicated on the back of the car on one of the many upgraded carbon panels, including the wing, this central air intake, and also as part of the livery of this car there is exposed carbon stripe, which is actually part of the bonnet and the bodywork itself. So the bonnet on this is carbon and the roof is carbon, and this stripe flows. It's actually exposed from within the paint. That's not applied on it from a sticker or anything like that. This is exposed and lacquered from the actual paint job itself, and it runs over the top of the car. I mean, that's such a gorgeous feature. Look at that. It's amazing. And this was actually the car that Porsche introduced their all carbon fiber wheels on. Now, annoyingly, this car doesn't seem to have those wheels. It's such a shame. But they look exactly like that, with the matching exclusive paint pinstriping on the shape of the alloy. But the whole wheel on the optional wheels is constructed from carbon fiber. It's such a shame that this doesn't have them, because they look incredible. And that was one of the unique features of this car, was the introduction of an all carbon fiber wheel. It's very, very cool. And then casually next to it is a Singer Porsche. Now, I'm not sure if you guys watch my content from Dubai in January. I actually joined the owner of this car on a track day at Yas Marina, so pretty funny to see it for sale here. Anyone who's interested in a Singer in the Middle East, check out LN Class. They have a gorgeous one for sale. And then while we're in this Porsche triangle, my all-time favorite Porsche, the Carrera GT, in my all-time favorite colorway. It's black with the chestnut interior. My heart actually begins to beat faster when I'm around this thing. One day, guys, one day. You know, when I bought the TDF this year, this was a very close contender. It was the TDF or a Carrera GT. Every time I see one, I'm like, should I have gone for a Carrera GT? I mean, the TDF for me is absolutely everything. It pulls on every string on my heart. It's the engine, it's the story of this car. I'm convinced we're never going to see anything like it again. When I was doing some research into it, when I was really considering buying one, just before I ended up buying the TDF. So the more commonly known story about the engine in the Carrera GT is that it was developed for Porsche's LMP1 Le Mans car, which is in part true, but it started its very, very early life as a Formula One engine. There was a Formula One team called Footwork back in the day, which commissioned Porsche to develop an F1 engine for them. The following year, Footwork Formula One team never came back to Formula One, and so the engine was shelved until Porsche brought it off the shelf and then began developing it as an LMP1 engine. So get this, you've got a F1 derived, LMP1 developed, naturally aspirated Porsche V10, which never made it to a Le Mans car, and Porsche thought, I know, let's stick it in a road car. Like I said, we're never going to see anything quite like this again, and that for me, it's the story and the DNA of the car which appeals to me as much as the actual drivability of it. Very, very special. One day. And the list goes on and on and on. I mean, here we have a Mansouri Veyron. These are niche to say the least. I mean, these guys do the craziest carbon weave. Look at it. They even go to the extent of extending it on top of the engine covers in the engine bay. And this is what makes LN Class so special. We have the Holy Trinity in multiple forms lined up right here. I mean, another 918 here, P1, back to the 918 and the LaFerrari with classic counterparts next to it. I mean, it really is a very special place, and I'm only in just a small section of this place. It goes on and on and on and on and on. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to take the cover off that, but that is a Lamborghini Veneno Roadster. Yeah, these guys do it different. Bye-bye, favorite car. Okay, so that is it for my time at LN Class. It's short but incredibly sweet, but today is about a bigger event. I am heading to the Bulgari Hotel to catch up with none other than W Motors. Now, I'm not sure if you watched my video earlier this year, but I had the honor of the first drive of the new Fenir. And today, we're not only going to see that car, but lots more very cool hypercars. Let's hit it. We are back. I have stayed in some hotel rooms in some amazing locations around the world, but never in all of the places I've stayed have I had a view like that. That is the best view of the world's tallest building I think I have ever seen. the Burj Khalifa right outside my door. It's unbelievable. And at night time, which I shall share with you in future content, down there is the iconic fountain display of downtown Dubai, which is a miracle in itself to witness. Dubai Mall over there, the skyline of Dubai and the ocean. So not only do I have one of the most amazing city views, I also have a sea view combined together. Only in Dubai. Anyway, welcome to the terrace. This is the terrace of my beautiful apartment, and I'm going to be spending some time out here, hopefully have some friends over, have some food and enjoy this view. I arrived here just in time to see the sunset yesterday, and at night time, for me, this is when this place really comes alive. I'll share that with you this evening. But yeah, this is us. Now, it's actually a big space this. We've got plenty of room for furniture. I'm going to take you over the other side here and spin you around. So this is me for the next few weeks. Unbelievable. Of course, I'm not living outside. There is an apartment in here too. And check it out, here we are, well furnished. Now, how I landed myself here is that the last time I was in Dubai, I got friends with one of the guys that runs Damac. So Damac are incredible property and hotel developers out here in Dubai. We both got on incredibly well, both petrol heads. Ali, who's hooked me up with this place, has a beautiful McLaren 720S, which he was very kind to lend me the last time I was here. We just got on really well. He said, look, the next time you're here, give me a call and we'll put you up in a nice place. Nice place? Ali, mate. Just blown nice place out of the water. Thank you so much for this incredible location. Seriously, if you guys want to come down and stay in Dubai and experience the best view in town, this place. Stay in the Damac Maison Royale. That's where I'm staying right now, and that's how you get that view and really convenient access to the rest of Dubai. I mean, you've seen where we are. It doesn't get much more central, doesn't get a better view, that's for sure. Anyway, I'll put a link to that info below. I've stayed in a lot of places in Dubai. So far, this is my favorite. But on to the apartment tour. So it's actually a serviced apartment, which means you can go out and get food if you want to, but they have an incredible kitchen downstairs, which if you can dream it up, they generally seem to have it in. And this is where I'm at. So lounge, wonderful TV setup, and the kitchen area. Now, what was really beautiful when we arrived, I have had a few nibbles at it, but yes, they prepared us this wonderful fresh fruit platter that was waiting for us in the fridge. As you can see, I've had a few chunks of pineapple earlier on. Yeah, and it's constantly stocked with wonderful drinks ready to rock. We got coffee machine. You can cater for yourself, as I mentioned, as you wish, while looking over that incredible view. I still have to double take. Look, just behind the curtains. Look, that's the Burj Khalifa. Just behind, from the kitchen, look. Incredible. And through here we have two bathrooms. We have this larger area here, conveniently dark. One bathroom there. Wonderful granite ensuite. Also has an incredibly cool view. Master bed, and then we overlook the other side of Dubai. I mean, look, even look all the way there in the horizon. More skyscrapers being built. What an amazing place. So, I've got a little while to kill before the event with W Motors. Gonna edit so I can share this video with you guys, and then we're heading into town to the Bulgari Hotel for a very special event. Okay, we finally made it. This is the first event of my time in Dubai, the W Motors Cars and Legends event. We've met here at the Bulgari Hotel. This is a brand new complex. It's absolutely stunning. They've created their own wonderful harbour here. And basically, they've gathered, just on time, some of the most wonderful supercars in town, Bugatti and Azzuro Dino's Azzuro Dino LaFerrari. Let's check out some cars. Okay, first of all, as a spot of context, look at the backdrop to our supercar meet. This is where we're beginning. The idea is that we're going to be taking these supercars, driving through a little bit of downtown Dubai, and ultimately ending up in the new W Motors showroom. Now, I took a look at that last year. Can't wait to see the finished article now. Let's have a look around at some cars. So this Aventador Rose has just turned up. Azzuro Dino, or Abdul, as you guys may know him from previous content, has brought down his Azzuro Dino painted LaFerrari. Now, he believes, and I'm sure it's right, that this is the only Azzuro Dino painted from factory LaFerrari in the world. And the detail on it is so cool. Look at this yellow pinstriping down the nose. It looks incredible. I'm not sure if the camera's doing this thing justice, but believe me, it's so nice to see a LaFerrari in a bright colour other than red. Look at it. I love with the LaF that you can see all of the wiring and piping from the hybrid unit. Satin blue Aventador Roadster with a really contrasting iridescent red interior. That looks cool. So what I do love about the Middle East is that they are not spec shy. They really go to town when it comes to making bright and beautiful cars. We've got a McLaren 650S Spider. This car always reminds me of Shmi. A V12 Vantage, manual no less. I'm pretty confident that these things are certainly going to hold their values pretty strong, and in the future, no doubt go up. Let's face it, naturally aspirated V12s are a dying breed as it is, but with a manual, very cool car. Mercedes SLS, and here we have not one, but two W Motors cars. We've got the Lykan and the Veneer. This I had the honour of driving this exact car around the sunny, leafy roads of Surrey back in August, and to see it all the way over here, it just fits in to this environment, doesn't it? Look at the styling on it, it's so abstract. I love how crazy it is. So we're going to be joining this in a convoy over to the W Motors showroom shortly, and to finish off, this carbon-bodied Veyron Vitesse. Wow, look at the chrome polish finish on that. These things, you know, it's not until you get up close with them you really appreciate the craftsmanship and detail. Nobody does it quite like Bugatti. So we're in the Lykan.
Yes.
With Benoit from W Motors. So I've never been in the Lykan, man. I've driven the Veneer.
Yeah.
We took this car to the top of Jebel Jays.
Indeed.
But I never got to go.
Yeah.
No. And
who won the race?
Because Ali won the race.
Yeah, that's right.
Is this the car that jumped through the skyscrapers?
Yeah.
This is the Fast and Furious car.
That's the Fast and Furious car.
This is cool. We're in the Fast and Furious Lykan. With the holograms. It's hard to film, but this is like not actually there. Like my finger goes. Look, my hand is so far in there. It's crazy. It's amazing.
You can see it.
That's amazing how that works. Wow. It's really hard to capture on film because of that screen is not there. It's like floating. It's an amazing
unique
thing.
Experience.
Very unique. Right, man. So we're joining the convoy. I believe the Rolls Royce is leading the way, and we're gonna be and we'll be following the Veneer. Let's do it. All right, we're being followed by the Azzuro Dino LaFerrari. This is the craziest thing. We are in a Lykan next to a LaFerrari. We've got the Veneer up front, and this is the Fast and Furious car, which makes it even more crazy. And when the sun goes down in Dubai, just this city for me comes alive at night. I love it.
Been a little too nice for y'all. Now I gotta up price for y'all. Snake eyes on dice for y'all. Shoulders on ice for y'all. A6 all the hate. I won't get a ball today. Got lost in the ball.
Man, look how good this picture is. Look at that picture. Oh man, Dubai in the background with a LaFerrari and a Veneer. What is going on? Day one in Dubai did not disappoint. W Motors showroom.
So Alfredo will share with us today some really inspiring stories on what happened behind the scenes when they worked on creating the SLR, on creating the Maybach, and on creating some of the most incredible cars of this century.
So, remember when I was talking about the Fast and Furious car? Well, this is the actual car that ended up getting smashed through various skyscrapers. Obviously a good chunk of it was CGI, but hence all of the smashedness. Look at the inside, like it's complete, it's just trashed inside. But this is the car. So it's very, very cool to see part of this brand's significant history in here. Anyway, it's about time that I call it a night. Despite the music, party's over. Man, I could really get used to the various modes of awesome transport that ferry me back to my various locations. Look at this. Thank you, sir. You'll have to forgive the blueness of my hand. The backlighting on my balcony is blue. And no doubt, oh yes, look! And my blue face. You'll have to forgive that too. Not sure if that'll make much difference. No, I'm just a silhouette. And that view, let's face it, is way prettier than my face. Anyway, forgive the smurfness. That is my first day in Dubai. I mean, as far as first days go, starting with a view like that, finishing with a view like that, and everything in between. Oh, this place is ridiculous. You know, I seriously contemplate spending a lot more time here. Anyway, I'm going to try my best to do back-to-back content. Tomorrow, we are hitting Dubai Autodrome for a very cool track day in the morning. And then, yeah, lots of other epicness to unfold. And then we have the Formula 1 weekend. And then we're here for another week after that. And there's lots of good stuff happening. So, before you get all smurfed out, as always, thanks for watching. And I shall see you next time. Ciao. Normally, when I'm in a supercar and I'm introducing it, in the first few seconds of the video, I'm normally tear-arsing around at maximum speed, heavy braking, downshifting through the gears. But today, I want to talk about really living with. I mean, genuinely spending day-to-day time with a supercar. Now, let me just begin by saying we are living in crazy times. So I've just been refreshing the stats of this car, just flushing it through my brain, and actually I've sort of taken a step back and reprocessed it somewhat. So I have actually been dailying this car, certainly at least when I've been in England. But having a look at the numbers, and why I say we're living in crazy times, is that we forget the context of what we're driving. So we say McLaren 720S like it's just a number. 720 is a model number. Well, that actually stands for something. That stands for 720 PS, which in horsepower terms is around about 710 horsepower. 710 horsepower. It's got 568 pounds-feet of torque. So when we sort of just say 720S, kind of blasé, that is a figure of context. That is something that says you're in something serious. Now, just to further apply context to that figure, before this car joined the channel as a long-termer, my daily driver was a GT3, and I know that sounds crazy, but once again, we're living in pretty crazy times. That car is 500 horsepower. When you drive that car, when you drive the GT3, the last thing you think is, do you know what, this car needs some more power. That's the last thing you think. And yet, right here, I'm sat in something with another 210 horsepower. That's like, just, you know, throw another hot hatch in there. It's bonkers stuff. So I just want to set some context as to the engineering marvel that is the 720. We're driving something that, from my experience, upon planting my right foot hard against that throttle, things distort. The world around you sort of blurs into this tunnel vision. Your diaphragm gets pressed against the seat, and you genuinely do brace yourself for the attack of momentum that is unleashed upon the torque and the power of this thing exploding you down the road. However, talking about it being a daily driver, right now I'm following a truck. We're doing 27 miles an hour down a wonderful country lane. The sun is shining through this goldfish bowl-like canopy of a cockpit. I say goldfish bowl because the visibility is incredible. And I'm driving it, dare I say it, like a Golf. That's the benchmark, isn't it? A Golf. I don't know why everyone says that, but it seems to be a thing. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? We have the engineering marvel to be able to control 710 horsepower, and this isn't factually proven, but I'm convinced that 710 horsepower is at the wheels, because the way this thing propels you across tarmac is unbelievable. I did a drag race last year in my 675 LT against a Porsche 918 Spider, classified as a hypercar, not a supercar. It's the next step up. And up to 100 miles an hour, those two cars were nose to nose. And then after 100 miles an hour, up to 120, 30, 40, 50 plus, 918 vanished. And I thought to myself, you know, that's where your other £500,000 goes. Beyond 100 miles an hour, it just vanished into the horizon. I haven't tried it yet, but feeling and being familiar with the power in a 675 LT, and now being familiar with the power in a 720S, I honestly think that this thing would give a 918 Spider a good run for its money. And we're talking about what was Porsche's flagship hypercar just a few years ago. And yet here we are in relative comfort. I've got a great sound system. I've got my 5-finger death punch plugged in via my Bluetooth from my phone, and it's in automatic, and it's just casually going up and down the gears like this was a pure daily driver. So that's the engineering appreciation out of the way for context. Let's talk about what it's been like. Well, I've had the car for about 2 months. Granted, I haven't been around for a solid 2 months in order to spend time with it, but every time I'm home, and every time I just want to hop in a car and go about my day, purely outside of filming, I've been living with the McLaren 720S, living with a 710 horsepower supercar. Practicality wise, look, I mean, I don't actually class myself as a journalist, so I rarely do a by convention review of a car. What I like to do is take you along for the drive and explain what it's like, immerse you in the experience of driving these cars. But I feel an obligation to tell you what it's like to live with something like this. On the outset, you would think impractical, inefficient, loud, uncomfortable. There's just no way you could use it every single day. Categorically, you can, without a shadow of a doubt. The space that this car has now as well. So this is running, don't forget, a full carbon tubbed architecture. It's running mono cage 2, McLaren's latest carbon tubbed setup in their Super Series cars. There is mono cage 3, which is in the Senna, but right now let's focus on 720. What it's opened up is this huge area in the rear here, which, if you don't have any bags in it, opens up massive visibility. And if you do, there's bag straps there to genuinely tie down your bags and take a lot of stuff around. Now, I've had the few occasions where I've either been on a shop or I've been on a road trip. I've just generally had lots of stuff with me. The boot in the front is big. Like, I would say 90% of the trips I do, even together with my wife, we've been able to do everything with just the front boot alone. But if there is any excess stuff, we've been piloting it in this space here. It looks at first like it's practical, and it is in terms of the space being offered, but what can be quite annoying, if whatever you've got isn't able to be fitted down underneath those straps, it's forever sliding around it in the back. And heaven forbid, if you anchor on after you've been using all 710 horsepower, that air brake comes up and you reduce momentum like you've hit a brick wall.
whatever's in the back quickly becomes in the front. so that really is a sort of secondary measure for carrying stuff. However, it is there. Now, I don't talk about efficiency when it comes to supercars. Let's face it, if you're buying a supercar, the last thing you're thinking about is how efficient this thing is. However, what I have been doing a lot with in this car is motorway miles. I've been going up and down to MBN London, and it cruises incredibly well. I would say that there is quite a bit of road noise. Now, that's in part down to the tyres, but also because there's something about the way that a carbon tub resonates, is that it just generally lets in a little bit more road noise. It just vibrates from the tyres through the tub, and the ambience, as I'm sure you can even hear now, we're going pretty steady, and there is this, I would say, above average road noise that comes through the cabin. Now, when you've got your music on and you're blaring along and you're in your driver focus mind, you don't mind so much. It's actually, funnily enough, when I start filming like this and I'm aware of it when I'm in the edit, and I'm like, oh wow, actually the ambient road noise is quite loud. Particularly when you have a passenger, you do start feeling like you're talking a little bit louder than you might expect. Having said that, because the car's got so much torque and it's so light, once you get this thing rolling and you're in 7th gear, it's actually incredibly efficient. Now, I don't have a very accurate way of giving you my average miles per gallon, because as soon as I get off the motorway, I'm driving this in a manner that, let's say, makes this thing drink with 2 straws. So the average miles per gallon for me is kind of like 22. So listen, it's not great, but you got to remember the platform we're in. We're in a 4-litre twin turbocharged flat plane crank V8 that, as I mentioned, propels you down the road with some kind of space technology. So really, as a combined figure, 22 is not all that bad. But when you're on a run, I find it perfectly acceptable. And I think that's most in part between big torque and lightweight, winning formula always. Now, I actually want to talk about value. So, from a factory, if you were to spec one of these, like well-spec, like pretty much how you'd want it, forget the MSO stuff. MSO, for those of you guys who don't know, is the options list beyond the options list. It's basically if you want to create something bespoke for your car, a custom colour, some carbon in places that it isn't, some pinstriping or fancy Alcantara or something like that, it goes to McLaren's MSO division, which is McLaren Special Operations. But if you were to just use the options list, you could get a very nicely spec'd one of these cars for like 230 to 250,000 pounds. Listen, I'm not throwing that number around lightly. That is vast coin. I appreciate that. I mean, considering what you're getting, I just mentioned earlier, this is 918 Spider performance. Listen, I don't care what anyone's saying, you're getting that kind of acceleration for 230 grand. 250 grand if you're gonna go big time on the options. You can drive it every single day. It's more practical. I think it looks incredible. This is the kind of car that has grown on me so much. I think we'll all agree that when the car launched and it was announced, the controversy that surrounded the aesthetics of the car was rife throughout the internet. The more I see them, the more I fall in love with them. The aerodynamic sculpture of these is something to behold, particularly in the right paint job. I found that the ones with a heavy metallic fleck in them really shows up those contours. This is in a colour called Fistral Blue, which from the outset looks kind of similar to Porsche Miami Blue. The difference is that in the sunshine there is actually metallic flecks in the paint, and it really pops and really helps to show off the contours of the car. What is going to happen one day is that they're going to make a Spider version of this car, and then we've got the inevitable LT version of. Now listen, when I drive this car, the last thing I think is this needs to be any faster, any lighter, any more hardcore. It is phenomenal. But the prospect of them doing so, the prospect of them applying LT DNA to this car excites me greatly. And I'm pretty confident that I will be in the queue for one of those cars when it launches. As a complete package, it's still going to offer everything that I've just spoken about, but it's going to have more emotion. I remember on my 675 LT, when you upshifted around about 7,000 RPM, it used to have this whip crack bang, which just engineered in so much more emotion into the car. And that brings me on to the way this car makes you feel. Sometimes you look down at the speedo and you're like, how did I arrive here? The numbers boggle the mind, because the momentum you have gained with such little effort makes you wondering how you arrived there. What I like out of a supercar is I like to step out of it and think, yeah, I've just been for a drive. Like, I have driven that thing. Sometimes in this, it propels you with such little effort that you can't help but feel that it is sometimes a little bit unengaging. That is until you really start to push on and grab it by the scruff of its neck. This thing seems to find its own plane and rewards you for going swift. When I say swift, I'm sure you can imagine the kind of numbers I'm talking about that we shan't mention on camera. But when you do get it up there, when you do get it into what I would call its operating realm, it becomes a new car. The way this thing gives you feedback at proper speed, the way that the brakes on this act like they shed off speed. Honestly, it's like there's an anchor attached to the back of the car and you've just thrown it into the tarmac and just boom, just absolutely anchors on. And to think that there's going to be an evolution of this car that's even lighter, even faster, brakes better, handles with more agility, makes me scratch my head. Every car that I get into from McLaren, and I've stopped saying it because it sounds like a broken record, but I am like, where next? Like, where do we go from here? And I think that every time I get in a car. The 600 LT, which is the top of their Sport Series cars, is now faster than the 675 LT just a couple of years ago. And that was their like flagship Super Series car. The rate of development and evolution from this brand is mind-boggling, and that's one of the things that I admire about McLaren the most. A lot of their time, they push boundaries further than anyone else in the supercar segment. I think they've really made the rest of the industry stand to attention, because beforehand no one was making cars like this. I mean, we've got a full carbon tubbed supercar that is the same performance as hypercars. It's just bonkers, and you can use it every single day. They're so far ahead. I mean, no one's doing styling as radical as McLaren right now. But after they've settled into the world for a couple of years, that's when they start becoming appreciated and they start to fit in and become beautiful. And I've noticed that this thing, it's so many looks. You park it up, people just kind of gather around it and take photographs. It's really cool to see people appreciating it, and it's also really cool that it's made in England. I really like that. I forget that lots of the cars that I'm driving, the Ferraris, the Porsches, you know, I can't drive a short distance down the road and go and visit their factory. These guys are based in Woking. It's really nice to have that connection with the brand. But finally, I would like to conclude by drawing parallels between cameras and cars. You ask a photographer what the best camera is, and they'll say it's the one you use the most. And I think the same is applied to cars. Now hear me out. I plan on driving this car throughout the whole year, and importantly through winter, which, if you spend any time in England during winters, you'll know it's horrific. So when I get back from Dubai, I'm having winter tyres fitted to the 720S, and I'm going to use this car throughout the year. I'm going to do my Christmas shopping in it, I'm going to be visiting friends and family, I'm going to be using it like you would do any other car. And that's the number one trick of the McLaren 720S. You can use it. You can use it for everything. Business, pleasure, track days, road trips, and everything in between. 710 horsepower. It looks like this. It goes like a crazed mosquito on smack. It's just intense acceleration, and then you can slow back down, put it into automatic, and it takes care of the gears for you. And on that note, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Dubai. Ciao. God, it's mad. Hello, welcome back to NVN London. So yes, Back once again, updates have been happening. I haven't been here for around about 2 weeks, probably over 2 weeks now. The rate of development is rapid. Let me show you a quick tour around, show you what's going on, and share with you one of the biggest projects to take place as part of the MVN London development.
This is quite a big moment. So this is the first time that we have a sample of both the potential tiles that we'll be putting on the floor and the light we'll be using. So this is the perfect opportunity to check it out. Now in MVN Dubai, we've got a tile which is quite, it's fairly like slatey grey, right?
Dubai tile.
So this is our Dubai tile. Okay. Yeah. And for here, we're in two minds whether we should go Dubai tile or slightly lighter, right?
Slightly lighter, yeah. A shade lighter.
That's got a more mirror effect on it as well, isn't it?
And we are 2 mil thicker, right?
And we're 2 mil thicker,
yeah, slightly thicker.
Which is because it's Italian. I can't tell you it's made in the Ferrari factory, which makes it any better, but it's made in it.
And that's a contrast to the lounge, you can see.
Nice. So this is a component of the lounge which I'm going to keep secret, because right now it kind of still looks like, well, you know, a building site. But when all of these components come together, we think it's going to look really, really cool.
Go for it, Graham.
All right, yep.
How many square meter?
960.
960 square meter?
960
It's
square meters of tile.
20 tons.
20
tiles.
tons.
20 tons. We need 20 pallets, ton a pallet.
Well, some serious exercise. Putting it out.
It's one container from Italy. One container.
One whole, like,
One
shipping container.
Shipping container, 20 tons.
Of tiles just for this floor. I mean, I was saying, like, on camera, it's really hard to sort of contextualize how big this place is.
Yeah.
There you go. 20 tons, 900 and... How many?
960 square meters we need. It's 1,000 square meters, really, but
Yeah.
we're taking out where they're in the
And
showroom.
the lounge area. This place is big, guys. Check it out. Our lights have arrived. It's like a strip light that rolls out and goes in this sort of housing here, which we've got set up as a demo. You can just see it in there, actually. Look, that strip light. How cool is that? And obviously with it being LED, super efficient as well.
So yes, I did mention when this project started that it was one of the biggest things I've undertaken. The tiling of the floors here is one of 3 of the largest jobs which is taking place. 960 square meters of tile. It's going to take the guys an entire month just to apply it to the floor. It's a huge job. The grouting alone between the tiles is going to take 4 to 5 days. It's monumental. As Graham mentioned back there, Graham's our contractor. He's been awesome. Yeah, shipping it in from Italy, 20 tons of this stuff. The idea has always been from day one that when you step inside this place, we want it to feel much more like a venue, like a showroom rather than a warehouse. Right now, it's very warehousey. When it's completed, we want it to feel like a beautiful destination, like a car showroom. So adding tiles on this floor, while it's a monumental job, is one of those features that is going to transform the whole feel of this place when you walk inside. As another spot of context, the lighting that's going in, which I shall show you when I get back next time. Lighting is a hugely important part of obviously detailing cars. You need to have as much clarity as you possibly can. The roof is going to have 125 of those strip lights that we just showed you over there. The numbers of all of this stuff, like when you start to hear it, 960 square meters of tiles, 125 strip lights, it's 14,500 square feet. It's on and on and on. Everything, as we delve deeper into this project, everything just ramps up and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Cannot wait to launch this thing.
This is sort of my little project within inside this bigger project is the lounge area. If you watch the beginning journey of this area we've got here, it's over 75 square meters. So from this point to that point, and then to that post and that post, floor to ceiling glass. So you can overlook all the work going on out there. From there to that line, just going to be pure glass. As I mentioned on the last video, the first thing which has been taking place has been all above ground. Now to keep it on theme with cars, I wanted the aircon installation to look as exhaust pipe-like as we possibly could. So we've designed it this way. Look at this, how cool does it look? And the roof, we've got this gorgeous corrugated aluminium in the roof line, sticking with the car theme and the exhaust pipe feel of the aircon. It's gonna be so cool. And to overlook all of that, when we eventually host the podcast here, because this will be the podcast lounge, when we hold it here against the glass, every episode, and even live during the episodes, because of course we will be filming it, the background will be constantly changing. It'll be ever evolving, because we're always going to have this new influx of cars in and out. It's going to be the perfect environment for it. We've got proper equipment in now to literally break ground. These guys are here to help dig the drainage in the floor, because of course we are ultimately cleaning cars here, so we need to get rid of the dirty water. I'll share that with you at some stage, because the filtration that we've had to have in order to clean away this dirty water is a pretty big job in itself as well.
Okay, we're on our way out of London, back in the 720S. There's going to be a video coming soon about living with this thing, because living with it is what I've been doing, and it's been unbelievably cool so far. But we are now on to the Q&A segment of this video with regards to NVN specific questions. Because ever since I launched this project, you guys have been asking, quite rightly so, question after question. And this is the first opportunity really to address some of those. So, let's start with Milan Mizlai. Will NVN ever be the place for a supercar meet? That would be awesome. Yes, of course, we are definitely going to be using NVN as a base for either our own events or supercar clubs to use as a destination to stop at, be it the beginning of a supercar drive or the end or halfway through, or whatever it may be. Anyone who's part of the community who wants to get involved, yes, we are absolutely open to that. Okay, next question from Castor Troy 8. There is some stiff competition in the market. Does that worry you? So for me, competition is a good thing. First of all, it gives you an indicator that there is demand for this service in the market. If there wasn't, then competition wouldn't exist, and it might even make you think, why isn't anyone else doing this? Now that might be an exception if you've invented something new. Of course, you might not necessarily expect there to be any other competition. But in this scene, yes, there is competition. That for me is brilliant. Not only does it make us step up our game, it also qualifies that there is a viable business proposition out there. And when you see competition, it gives you the opportunity to do things differently, and that's what we're here to do at NVN. Yes, ultimately we are applying paint protection film, but that moves us nicely on to the next question from Drain.Snake. What differentiates you from the competition? Well, when I think about this question, I would always give a similar example like, well, for every Starbucks there's a Costa coffee. They ultimately both provide a similar product, but people have allegiances to different brands for different reasons. For every Nike, there's an Adidas, and so on. It's all to do with brand experience. For me, in my eyes, the importance of NVN is not just the product itself, it's the service, the experience, and the quality. Now, what we really want to make sure that we don't do is spread ourselves too thin and become too busy so that we cannot allocate the amount of time that is absolutely required to give the best quality job on a car. In business, it's very hard to not accept all of the work which is being thrown at you, because obviously business leads to revenue. The thing is, if you spread yourself too thin, you can never fully do the job to the quality that is not only expected, but is also warranted. Like, you need to be able to apply your absolute care, attention, and detail to this process to justify you being the best in the game. If you can't allocate your time and attention accordingly to what that customer is paying for, you're going to start to have issues. So first of all, we want to maintain the absolute best quality. What that will mean is we probably can't do as many cars in terms of volume as maybe the next company might be able to do. But we're not here for volume, we're here for quality. We're quality over quantity. So that's the first thing that we are addressing. The second thing is the community aspect. Now, what I've found with a lot of companies in this business is that they're actually quite faceless in that they are just a company, which means that a lot of the time you don't even get to interact with them. You just drop off your car, or in fact your new car gets dropped off on a trailer and you never even see the company who's doing the work for you. You very rarely interact with the people behind the brand, and I think it's such a shame, because this world, what is a massive part of the ownership of these cars is the culture that surrounds it. It's the people you meet. And that's a huge part of it. Like, outside of the driving enjoyment, it's the meets where you can go and catch up with like-minded people. And for me, one of the most outstanding features of NVN in Dubai was that it was a community-driven company. It wasn't just a business-driven brand, right? And so ultimately, we are a open-doored brand. We want people to come in, no obligation. If you're interested in having PPF, come in, sit down, enjoy a coffee, which is why we're putting so much emphasis on the lounge. I mean, if you look at it from a purely business point of view, we are allocating 75 square meters of our floor space to an area which has nothing to do with the business we're in, right? We're not allocating that 75 square meters to trying to fit in some more cars and applying more PPF. We're allocating it to the lifestyle. We're allocating it to the reason people buy these cars. It's not just about applying the PPF. We want you to feel part of the family. We want you to feel welcome, and we want you to embrace what this wider culture is all about. And that, for me, is something that differentiates us from what I've seen pretty much everyone else. So that, for me, is almost the core of it. It's the human element as well as the product element. So next question from Mick_Chung. Are there any jobs going? Are you looking for any experienced detailers? Yes, yes, and yes. So I would officially class this as the job spaces are open. So what I'm going to do is I'm putting an email in the description below. Please, if you really are interested in working at NVM, particularly on the detailing side and the paint protection application side, please drop us an email. Now, when I say an email, I must stress that it has to be an email to this link below. If you send me a direct message on Instagram, the chances are I won't see it, because I just get hundreds of DMs every day and I can't stay on it, and it would be a real shame if I missed your application. But also, ultimately, at the end of that email address is the NVN team who is going through everyone's CVs. We've actually had hundreds so far, and I haven't even officially said that we're looking for jobs, but now I'm officially saying it. So if you are interested in working at NVN, please send an email with your CV to the email below, which is info@nvn-motorworks.com. Link below. Send it away. The NVN team on the other end of that email will pick it up, and yeah, if we're interested, we'll give you a shout. Next question from Miguel Langel. Why did you choose this type of business? Quite simply, for the love of it, for the love of cars. The reason I'm a YouTuber that is surrounding himself with cars is it's because I love cars, and this for me is just the next step into my involvement in the car world. I just love cars. On that note, I truly believe, and you can use myself as a case study if you like, go into something or just immerse yourself and your life in something you love. There's many reasons for it, but the main two are you can fail doing something you hate, so you might as well start doing something you love. But the main reason is if you do something you love, you will inherently go over and above the normally recognized amount of effort in order to make your business succeed. And you'll be doing it almost without thinking, because it's the kind of thing that you'd want to do anyway. So if you're looking to change a job right now, or you're looking to set up a business, or just a look and change of lifestyle, my biggest tip is to do something you love. Not because it sounds cool, and not because it's nice to do something you love. It's because in this day and age, competition has never been stiffer. Like, there's more competition than ever. And if you do something you love, you will just outwork the next person. And you'll do it without thinking, purely because you love doing it. Like I often say, think of something that you would do for free and work on that. Because if you would do it for free, it means that you would just do it all day long and all night long and not even think twice about it. And honestly, that's the kind of work ethic you need in order to make something succeed. You've got to put a disproportionate amount of effort and hours to make anything a success. And if you love doing it, you'll do it without thinking about it, and you'll love every minute of it, and go over and above in terms of the effort and, you know, passion and pride and quality that you take in your work just because you love it. So that's why I went into this business. Next and final question from Eddie Mavro. What have you found to be the biggest hurdle starting a new business? I've actually started quite a few businesses over the last 15 years. Believe me, not all of them work. What I found is not the starting it, it's not the leap of faith to just go and do it. It's that business gaining enough traction that it becomes and maintains a viable business proposition. That kind of takes me back to the competition thing. When you see competition, you shouldn't think, oh, there's somebody else already doing that, I won't do it. You should be thinking, there's clearly a market for this. How can I do it differently? How can I do it better? Right? And so the biggest challenge that I've found, and this isn't just for this brand, this is for everything I've ever tried, is gaining enough traction, gaining interest, people basically caring. Are there enough people out there that it becomes a viable business proposition? And that for me has been the hardest thing. The great thing about this is, and going back to what I mentioned earlier, is that if you love what you're doing, you actually are the client for what you're doing. So you don't have to second guess. You don't have to think, oh, I wonder what the client wants, because you are the client. You are a client. You're doing it because you love it. This is the kind of business that you'd want to be associated with anyway. So if you end up doing something you love, that clarity of how do I appeal to the market should be much clearer, because you are a segment of that market, right? You don't have to go out there and do any market research. You are the market. You know what you want. Therefore, other people in this space will appreciate what you're providing. So rather than chasing the money, chase what you love. And I truly believe it's more likely that the money will therefore follow. That's what I would say. But that's the biggest hurdle. Without doubt, gaining traction, getting those sales. That's always the biggest thing. So effectively attracting an audience. That's the biggest hurdle. So I realized this video has all of a sudden become quite long. That's because Q&As I can go on for hours about. I'd love to do some more. I'll probably do some where I sit down and specifically address lots more questions, but we have lots more videos and lots more content coming. The podcast is also going to be launching at NVN London, which also gives me loads more opportunities to address loads more questions on the channel coming in the near future. Oh, and by the way, we're aiming to open, somebody did ask that question, and I'm really sorry if I've forgotten your name, but somebody did ask, when is NVN opening? We're looking at January. So not too long now. It's not necessarily like the beginning of January, like January the 1st, but sometime in January we are opening. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I shall see you next time. Ciao. Wait before I do the intro. This thing's nuts! Oh my god! I mean, it's wet, it's damp, it's very, very cold, and we're on for very high performance orientated tires. Welcome back to the F12 TDF. Now, we've finally done the first drive video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it was worth the wait. Being completely transparent, I did want to do it in a totally different country because, well, it's November, never the best of times in the UK, but nonetheless, the content had to come, and I just didn't see any other opportunity to film it other than this very small window. So here we are. Let me know, comments below, how did you like the first drive video? If you haven't seen it, the link is also below. But today, and doing a video which I don't normally do. So I normally just like to immerse you in cars in terms of the way they feel, what they're like to drive, try and sit you in the driver's seat as best as I can and convey what something of such an incredible creation of Maranello is like to interact with. But I also feel that because the specs on these cars are quite incredible and quite unique, I thought I owed it to you guys to give you a better feel of the car for future reference. I thought I would share with you the full spec breakdown of the car. What has been a unique introduction to Ferraris of late is that, oh my good God, have you heard that? The interaction! The relationship between the engine and gearbox on this thing is unbelievable, it's otherworldly. Anyway, yeah, if you want to hear about that sort of stuff, first drive video link below. One of the unique features of modern day Ferraris, I think from around like 2015 onwards, is the introduction of a spec plaque. So all of the optional extras that were in addition to the features that come with the car are laser engraved and then mounted on a plaque that is typically found in the boot of the car. So we're going to check out that plaque, I'll show you where it is, what it itemizes, and we'll go through what all of those options look like. Oh look, a very long straight. See you in a minute! This thing's a musical instrument, it's just ridiculous. Okay, so this, as I mentioned, isn't a video that I would normally do, but I do feel like a full spec run through of this car, like a full spec breakdown would be good for you guys to find out the finer intricate details of these wonderful cars. I'm going to show you as I go through this. So, first of all, I'm going to show you the plaque in the boot. Now, on the door of the TDF is two buttons down here. Top one is to release the fuel cap for when you need to fill it up, and this, as the symbol would suggest, is for the boot. Now if I press and hold this, you shall hear the boot click, just like that. And then we shall come around. Now, there is no further latch, it's just unlatched and off you go. Now inside, you'll see that the carbon runs throughout. Well, what's brilliant is that all of the satin carbon runs throughout. So any carbon that is spec'd on this car has become fully satin coated or matte coated, and I think it just makes the overall feel of this car feel a little bit more special. Typically, matte carbon in Ferraris is reserved for their limited edition special cars. Now you can option it as an optional cost in their standard cars, but as standard in their special cars, it does come with satin. And this here, this is the plaque I was telling you about. Now in the boot of the TDF it is quite well hidden, but these are the optional extras that were spec'd on the TDF. So you have a full breakdown here, look, and they've all got the codes next to them. So adaptive front lighting system, that is lights that turn, the actual bulbs themselves turn with the inputs of the steering wheel, so that you can see what is happening around corners. That is actually inbuilt with the option of the front nose lift. So this car by convention actually rides quite low. And so what happens is when you spec the option to be able to raise the height of the car, and particularly raise the nose, obviously with raising the nose of the car, the angle and trajectory of the headlights changes. So you actually get this option, the adaptive headlights option, as sort of as default by speccing that, because if you raise up the nose and the lights are pointing in the air, it's kind of not too good for seeing where you're going. So the lights actually in effect level themselves and point back down again upon the nose lift coming up. So with one option you kind of get two, which is why the nose lift option looks disproportionately expensive. Okay, let's start with the exterior of the car. Now, with the TDF being a special edition car, there is a lot of carbon that comes on the car as standard, but let's just look around at some standout features. So basically anything on the rear of the car that is black, other than the letters on the number plate, is actually in carbon fiber. What I particularly like is the Formula 1 inspired or race inspired fog light. So you'll see this has come directly off race cars. This shrouding, I'm not sure of the history or the purpose of the design of having the light come through multiple holes, but you'll see exactly this kind of fog light on Formula 1 cars and racing cars. And this housing, this casing for the light and also the reverse camera, which I shall just give a quick clean, molds nicely into the carbon diffuser. Now this also has active aero, so you see those red flaps there? Those flaps actually drop down upon speed to reduce drag. Now here is my favorite feature of the car. Now this is a specific feature to the TDF. I love these vents in the arches. This particular layout for me reminds me of the 288 GTO, but it's from the GTO series in general. There are often arch vents like this to help reduce pressure in the wheel arches, because this car will do over 200 miles an hour, and at that speed you do get quite a lot of air pressure building up in the arches. So to reduce lift and pressure in there, that's what these vents are for. Now, interestingly, on previous cars I have liked to have painted the brake calipers almost a contrasting colour to the rest of the car. These are painted Rosso Corsa, which is the same colour as the car itself. Now, I've never been a big fan of that, but something about on the TDF, it just seems to work. I think it's because there's so many contrasting panels on this car that it doesn't look like too much of a block of red. Case in point, right next to it, we have here these exaggerated, elongated carbon side skirt. If you go down towards the rear of the car, there is this huge flare of carbon that meets exactly with the outer wheel line, and it gives the car so much stance. And this is something else that's quite hard to convey on camera, is just how much wider the car is than a standard F12. Part of the reason for that is the fact that they put two 7.5 section front tyres on this car. That is absolutely huge. It's so huge that it generated so much grip from the front that Ferrari had to engineer rear wheel steer for the first time on any of their cars, and that is what has contributed to this car being so agile. When you get in this car, you actually approach it with your GT brain in, your Grand Tourer brain in, because of the platform it's based on. But because it's so hyper agile, you actually have to adjust your inputs with the steering, because it turns in like nothing else I've ever experienced with this kind of platform, particularly with it being a front engine car. It's incredible actually. You sort of steer more with your wrists than you do with your arms. It's so responsive. And coming around to the front, what might not be obvious immediately is the headlights. The actual inner buckets of the headlights are carbon fiber. So that is a distinct optional extra. To have satin carbon inside the headlights is incredible. And they've got these gorgeous light tubes that go up there, which at night time give the look of this car such a distinct and menacing face. I think right now this is one of the most aggressive, imposing looking Ferraris out there. We'll see what they end up doing with the 812 TDF equivalent, but until then, this for me, aesthetically certainly, just wows me. Every time I see it, I see a different sculpture, a different shape to the car, and it also comes alive and changes depending on the environment. Particularly when it's sunny, the sculpture shows up massively. Now, a unique feature to the TDF is this carbon side blade here. What you can't tell is that this whole aero bridge, that whole panel, is actually carbon fiber, and that's how they've managed to get this seamless integration of carbon and paint there. When you run your finger over this, there is no distinguishable feature at all to suggest how they've done that. It's not until you come around the back of it and you see underneath that you realize that that whole panel, this whole aero bridge here, is in fact carbon. And it's these little details that it's not until they've been pointed out to you that you realize that every single component of this car is different than it is on an F12. Little known fact, the rake of the rear window, so this whole rear section is actually at a different angle than it is on the F12. You might notice that it has specific glass. If you notice the shape of this glass, it is very bespoke. I would not want to crack that glass. God knows how much it would cost to replace, but if I give you a top-down view like that, so all of that shape there is one piece of glass. I love these flares, and when you're sitting behind it at sort of other road car level, it gives such a distinct shape. It's Very, very cool. Now, while we're around the back, this insert here across the back, that is also carbon. That does come standard, but it's just one more example of how many contrasting panels there are on this car. And this also has the upgraded exhaust system. So we've got anodized black titanium tips and a titanium exhaust, which is the sports exhaust upgrade. Now, I've never driven any other TDF to know if there's much of a difference in sound between the sports exhaust system and their standard exhaust system. Judging by that, at 5% throttle, this thing sounds ridiculous. One more unique feature to my car is the addition of a titanium fuel filler cap. Now, my dealer was only allocated 5 F12 TDF, and he said that no other TDF that he has seen has the titanium fuel filler cap. The reason that I optioned this was because, as standard, the wheels come with these wheel bolts here. Now, these are all titanium. You can identify them differently to standard Ferrari wheel bolts because they have this indentation here, and of course they are of a titanium sort of satin finish. Standard wheel bolts have a sort of a head on them, and they're shiny, and they just don't look quite as sporty. Now, when this car comes as standard, that fuel filler cap is actually bright silver, and when you stand back, it's amazing how much the fuel filler cap stands out. And I thought, you know what, with having these in titanium, it would be great to match the two so that the filler cap doesn't look sat there on its own. Now, one more exterior feature which is very unique to the TDF is this rear winglet on the outside of this tiny little window at the back here. This is all about aero and downforce and channeling air over for the car. But this is actually integrated into the window seal itself. Look, that is one single piece of rubber molded in. Now, you can't tell how stiff that is, and yet it forms part of this rubber window seal. You can see, look, it comes right out from under the car. When you see that in your rear view mirror, just flaring out over that arch, and you can just see the top of the exaggerated flick boot lid there, those three components combined with the more traditional style fuel cap is such a lovely sight. Okay, inside the car, join me. Now, for me, this is where the magic begins. The intricacies of the interior. Let me just close this door for you. Well, first of all, what you can't tell is that the door actually feels lighter. So Ferrari managed to shave 110 kilograms of weight from the original F12. Now, as a spot of context, their limited edition track focus cars normally shed between 90 to 100 kilograms. So they went that extra stage and shed another 10 kgs above their average weight loss. A lot of that is through the use of carbon fiber, and carbon fiber on the interior of this is kind of everything. Contrasting with the outside, where all of the exterior carbon is gloss, on the inside, everything is matte or satin. I can never tell what's the best description for it, but because we're so used to seeing carbon fiber with a gloss finish, when you get inside, it makes the interior on this so special and so unique. I could sit in here for hours. There's something about seeing carbon sculpture with a satin finish. It's just a magical thing. It's actually something that you can't see straight away. So behind the seat, I'll just show you now. If I reach in there, there's this little handle. See there? Look, that is the handle you lift up to articulate the seat forwards. But it's not until you see the back of these seats you realize the whole rear, in fact the whole seat in fact, is made of matte carbon, but it's the shape of it. It's almost organic, you know. It's like a life form type of shape. There's so many flowing shapes. There's this hole here that goes right through to the other side of the seat. I love this simple, it's just a simple little handle here that you use to release and pull this seat forward, and it gives access to all of this shelf on the back where more carbon, the end plate on this shelf as well, is all satin carbon. But I love how much effort they've gone into continuing this carbon theme throughout the car. So there's an area that you hardly ever see, but when you do see it and you pull those seats forward, it's just gorgeous. Look at that there, it's awesome. So, over the shoulder then, let's start at the back. This whole shelf, even the bit that goes all the way up to the glass over there, this is all matte carbon. I shall go around to the boot in a minute because you will actually not believe that the size of this thing is colossal. You can actually remove this top shelf and this lower section here, which is currently dividing the boot. When you open that up, it is a cave of carbon fiber. I shall show you shortly. You probably won't believe how large it is. And then we've got these Alcantara straps here with the contrast Rosso coarser stitching, and the Alcantara from then on flows through the car. And I'll take the passenger seat as an example. I have the Cavallino, or prancing horse, stitched in matching Rosso stitching, with the central pinstripe running all the way through the middle of the seat. Now what's cool is, despite the fact that all of the seat is entirely clad in Alcantara, the middle section, this is beautiful leather, which is convenient because this section does actually pick up some jean stain. Now leather cleans up so much better. Sometimes I've seen the opposite way around, where the seat is leather and the contrasting panels are Alcantara, and they do pick up lots of dirt. So with this car being black and the sensitive components being leather, it's actually quite practical. One thing you might have noticed is that while this design beautifully carries on the theme through the dashboard, that section there actually isn't a glove box. No, there is no glove box in the TDF, despite it having a Grand Tourer platform. This is purely a knee pad, essentially, so the passenger can pull their seat forward, and while we're really tanking it, particularly on track, you can brace your knees against there if you wish to hold yourself in place a little bit tighter. And then on the dash, we have the optional extra of the passenger display screen. Now this is the Gen 1 screen. The Gen 2 now appears in the 812 Superfast, but if I just turn on the car, you can see right here that right now it defaults so the passenger can see the revs, the RPM, the gear we're in, and the miles an hour if you really want to scare them. But they have the option of being able to flick through all sorts of stats. All of this jazz, travel distance, travel time, it's all there for them to stay entertained / scared if they want to. And this is also linked in with the settings of the Manettino on the steering wheel. So if I were to change that, you can see it goes from race to sport to wet, and indicates to the passenger the different settings of the traction control and the diff and the gear shifts, etc. So yeah, it's all good fun. And then over here, now this is quite an interesting display, because it's this sort of hybrid halfway house between it being evolved further than what the F12 offered, but not quite as advanced as what the 812 offers. So for example, in here on the F12, it wasn't as detailed as this when it came to showing you the intricacies of the engine and tires. So this, when you're in race, displays if the engine is warm, if the tires are warm or too cool, and basically tells you the condition of the car and if you're okay to get on it. Generally, it's a really good indicator if you need to get any more heat in the tires, or if you're on track, if you need to drop it off a bit and actually let the tires cool down. Now, you did have this option in the F12. It's just that the way it was displayed wasn't as quite as in-depth as it is on this system here. And one other feature which you might remember from the Speciale is this control stalk, also clad in the matte carbon. So launch control, automatic, reverse, auto. I very rarely drive it in auto. I do prefer driving it with the paddles here, which by the way, by standard, has the elongated shift paddles. I'm not sure if you can tell from here, but they are absolutely huge. Ferrari recently have released an update for cars where you can retrospect these. If you put them next to the standard paddles, standard shift paddles, they finish about there. So these are almost 50% larger. But if you're in town or in traffic, or just generally want to chill, press the auto button and the whole drivetrain goes into auto. And then steering wheel in front of us, optioned with the carbon fiber driver zone, which gives you the entirety of the top of this. Look at all this, is all molded out of matte carbon. I could stare at it for hours. But it molds into this driver section here. Now, carbon fiber driving zone gives you the carbon wheel with the shift lights in the top here. Now, when you're really revving this thing out, this changes shades of color before indicating when the optimum shift time is, and it'll go all the way up here and then flash blue, and that's when you know when to pull the paddle at the optimum time. Also, of course, you can put this into many different modes down here. So I'm just going to turn it on. Just listen to this 1 second. It's ridiculous. Anyway, So this is the famous Manatino Wet Sport Race CT off and ESC off. Wet right now is amazing. The calibration that they have done on the ESC in wet is an amazing thing. Now you saw at the beginning of this video that this thing will spin up in 4th gear if it's damp and the tires aren't warm. In wet it doesn't skip a beat. It just has a very smooth way of managing the power delivery, so it never steps out on you in any crazy circumstances. This time of year, perfect. So sport is the equivalent of your sort of daily driving. If it's dry, you're not in the mood necessarily for grabbing it by the scruff of its neck, but you still want to enjoy the car in a spirited manner with all of the ESC on. Sport's where it's at. Into race. Now race is the option you would choose if you want quicker gear shifts. The way that this gearbox shifts in race is fantastic. It has the lightning speed shifts of a twin clutch gearbox because that's what it has in it, but what is very unique, and it's something that I've never felt in a dual clutch box before, it kind of shifts with the character of a single clutch and it gives you that whack, but it actually initiates the gear shift with the speed and precision of a dual clutch gearbox. I've always maintained the #1 thing that sold me this car is the relationship between the engine and the gearbox, and I go on about that time and time again. It really is something to marvel. For those of you guys that love the Aventador and the character that the gearbox brings to that car, I fully appreciate that. I'm gonna go out there and say it, that this is the best of both worlds. You put this thing into race, man, it slams that gear home. It's such an incredible feeling, but it does it, as I mentioned, still with the integrity of a twin clutch box. It is a marvel. And then back to 2 more final settings. We've got CT off and ESC off. So CT off is kind of like halfway house. It allows you to play around and slide it around, but it actually reads the angle of your steering compared with the angle of your throttle, and it basically knows if you have the ability and anticipation to have caught your slide to a degree. It's not going to bend physics and save you if you've gone past the point of no return. It just sort of helps you not get there in the first place until you do this. Now the trick to ESC off is you have to hold it over. So if I hold this over now, you just listen to it beep. There you go, and it says right there ESC off. Okay, that means you are controlling 770 horsepower through the rear wheels entirely on your own. You don't want that. I wouldn't recommend that. This thing is take no prisoners. One thing which is very unique about the character and how they've engineered the character of this car is because the car was invite only and they only made 799 of them, they were allowed a bit of freedom to tailor and cater this car to a specific type of client. And that is typically one with a lot of experience that doesn't necessarily want the car to flatter them. And that's exactly what this thing doesn't do. If you're not on your ball with this thing, it will bite you in the ass. The throttle response is razor sharp. The steering inputs, as I mentioned earlier, are ridiculous. It feels much more like a sort of rear mid-engined supercar than it does this Grand Tourer platform. And together with ESC off, I mean, you are on your own. So in weather like this, let's keep this off, and particularly on the road. That is track stuff only. Let's just briefly discuss the Ferrari instrument cluster. So on the left-hand side, the left-hand screen, this displays all of the information to do with your car, particularly dependent on the current driving setting you're in based on what you set on the Manatino. In the middle, it displays the gear you're in and the revs only. So the middle dial, that is purely revs, and you'll notice that the TDF tops out at 9,000 RPM, which for a V12 is the most glorious experience. And then on the right, you can configure what you would like to be shown there. By default, I have the speed in very big characters because this thing gathers pace like you wouldn't believe, and you need to be reminded of where you're at with that, otherwise you can get in trouble pretty quickly. But you can also, with the help of these buttons down here, you can have a play around with options like the radio and the settings for the sound system, which, by the way, this has the optional JBL upgraded sound system. So in there, media, this is where you would pair a Bluetooth device. You could connect it auxiliary, or you could connect it through USB, and you can keep on drilling down. Here's the navigation. Now, the navigation on the F12 was never that great. They have made a substantial upgrade on this in that, you know, it actually works. Now, I still kind of default to Waze generally on my phone, and I suction mount that to the screen, but I do have to say that I have used this a few times, and it is vastly improved over previous generations. Phone and setup, and in setup you can go through everything to do with the bass and treble on your audio, to connecting your phone and dimming and brightening the display, etc. So that's all going on the right hand side, and if you hold options and view down, it then returns back to speed, which, as I mentioned earlier, very handy. And then on the left, this is what shows up depending on, as I mentioned, what you set up with the Manatino. Now, for me, most of the information is available when you're in race. So this gives you all of the settings around the diff and the traction control, etc. But the vehicle information that you can get within race is basically more comprehensive than in any other setting. And you can flick through lap times, top speeds, you can have trips if you're on track to compare previous laps, and then you can also toggle into your status. So it gives you the engine and oil temperatures, pressures, battery levels, and importantly tire pressures, which again is more important when you're on track. But this gives you a sort of a clearer visual guide than was available in the previous standard F12 system. Now, I did mention as well that there has actually been an upgrade since then in the 812 Superfast, but this is a hybrid. This is a halfway house between the previous gen and the new gen, and for me it's a wonderful step up. Having spent 2 years in an F12, I guess I might notice it more than most, but take it from me, it's the instrument cluster is basically a higher res screen, more definition, more info. It's just a bit more of a crisp experience. Okay, finally, let's just come around to the boot again. Now, right now it's clearly in two separate sections. You've got the main boot, which is separated by this carbon panel here, and there's this baggage area with straps. However, this whole unit, which articulates like so, this whole thing comes out. So just check out the size of this space when this unit comes out. So what you do, so there's a little handle there, you pull that up like so, and it connects to this clip magnetically, like that. So that is held there. This comes down, and you can see just here, there's these little rails left and right of this panel. You pull him down, and you just pull it out, slot it right out like that, and then you have, I'm not sure if the camera's picking up on how big that is. Take it from me, 3 golf bags, easy. Not that I play golf, but it's just a general measure of space. You could definitely throw 3 golf bags in there. It is, look, the whole, it's colossal. So really, this is the ultimate Grand Tourer. Dare I say it, a Hyper Tourer. It's got the most incredible engine, and combined with such practicality. I mean, seriously, like, all joking aside, that is a, I'm just not gonna do it in any context. Just look at it, it's massive. That I've just mentioned, by far my favourite is the act of driving this thing. I mean, I know I go on about it, but for me it is all about that, the connection, the sense of massive gratification you get from interacting with this engine and gearbox, the relationship between the two. It's so razor fast. Look, I mean, that has the speed, it shifts the same speed as the PDK. in the Porsche, which by, I would say, all benchmarks is considered the greatest gearbox in the world. It's, oh God, it's just something to behold, isn't it? And as I was saying earlier, while if you put it into wet, and actually even sport, it does deliver that shift with pretty much a tone change kind of shift. Like I'm on the upshifts now, there's no drama there. It just does it as most other twin clutch gearboxes do it. But as soon as you put it into race, wait for the upshift. It also engineers a slam into it as well. I've never experienced a gearbox like it. The Aventador provides the slam without the finesse. The Porsche provides the finesse without the slam. This, it's molded them both together. It's just genius. It's the best. I love it. Wow. Anyway, as I mentioned, that isn't the normal style of video that I would typically do. Normally I'm all about sharing with you the drives and the wider lifestyle and culture that comes with these cars. But of all the cars that I featured on this channel, this one is the one which I have been requested to give a breakdown of the spec on more than anything. Tell you what though, you got to be careful in the wet. I can feel it having a bit of a squirm around. Yeah, you really, really need to be on it with this thing in the damp. Basically, even in a straight line, it can have somewhat of a squirm on you. Very progressive throttle inputs, please. Oh, there's that swell of torque after 5. Anyway, I digress. I'm getting swept up in the moment. Yes, you can request more details if you want to know more about this car. I'm all open to sharing it as much as possible. But as I mentioned, this is one of the cars where people have requested more than ever, more of a sort of an in-depth walk around and look and check out of the spec of it. So I hope that was what you expected. That's not typically the kind of style of video I normally share, but I hope you liked it. Please let me know in the comments below. So as always guys, thanks for watching and we shall see you next time. Ciao!
We're having a baby. So, yeah, I've got a baby on the way. I mean, like, not a new car, this is a human child is to be birthed soon, and it's mine. I mean, together with my wife. Normally, when I introduce something new to the channel, I'll be like, welcome to the Porsche Macan Turbo. But today I kind of don't know where to start. Obviously, the car guys here are probably like, well, tell us about the car. But also I feel like I kind of owe it to you guys to tell you about the situation, because while the content on the channel is obviously sort of strictly about the cars and the travel and the wider lifestyle, this is a really big deal. I'm having a baby. Now normally I'm very used to talking about cars. I don't really know what to say in this situation. I've been overwhelmed for the last sort of 7 months. The due date is the end of January, so I don't know what I'm going to end up doing then. Any dads out there or any new dads out there, if you got any tips or expectations, let me know. So just before we go into the baby thing, let's talk about the car. So you might have seen that the RS6 is for sale / sold. I'm not sure if it's sold yet or not, depending on when this video goes out, but we've got a lot of people inquiring about that car. There's a reason why the RS6 is going as well,
and it's because there's a baby coming. Now hear me out, you're probably thinking, whoa, that's like the ultimate dad car. And I agree, it's amazing. However, as a family car, unfortunately, my wife doesn't want to drive it. So, which is really strange because she likes performance, she likes going quickly, but she finds that the RS6 is, or particularly my spec, is a little bit too manly for her. She just thinks it's too big, it's a bit too aggressive, and she just doesn't like driving it, which is weird, I know. But that's one of the reasons, in fact, it's probably the main reason it's going. I had dreams of it being like the ultimate dad car, and then when I found out that my wife didn't want to drive it, yeah, it kind of put a downer on that, on top of all of the other things that I spoke about with regards to it becoming a higher mileage car, and also with there being a new RS6 out soon. Perhaps we'll spec one of those more unisex vibe so that she doesn't mind driving one in future. But the other thing is that she said it's predominantly because it's too big. And I was like, well, it's going to have to be fairly big because all of a sudden we've got to think about stuff like prams and all of the gear that comes along with having a baby. And friends that I've spoken to are like, you will not believe how much stuff you have when you have a child. I'm used to right now just walking out of the door with phone, wallet, keys and a camera and getting on with it. And they're like, you have no idea what's about to happen. The stuff you're going to have to bring along with you will change the car that you use regularly. And my wife was like, I'm not sure I really want to drive that bigger car. And so it really narrowed down the choice of cars pretty quickly because she still wanted something with performance. She loves cars. So for those of you guys that don't know, my wife and myself, we work alongside each other. And I often get questions like, you know, all of this traveling you're doing, you must have a very understanding wife because you're leaving her at home all of this time. Little known fact, I would say 90% of the journeys that I'm on, she's also there. So sometimes she's actually literally behind the camera and sometimes holds the camera. But if not, she's often doing work with the brands, like alongside the brands we're working with, or just helping out with the logistics of Mr. JWW as a whole. So she comes from a background that she just loves performance cars. And so we had this issue where we were like, we don't want a big car, but we want a car that's small with performance, but it's still going to have a lot of practicality. And when you start looking down the list of cars, there's not actually that many. And so you might be wondering, well, what was your journey like shopping around for these different cars? She and I were both like, what about a Macan? You know, like it's a Porsche, it has this performance ethos about it, and fairly practical. So we went and looked at one, and then I test drove a turbo, which I enjoyed, and then my dealer, which is Stratstone Porsche Winslow, gave me the keys to a performance. So it's a Macan Turbo Performance, which means it's had around about 40 brake horsepower upgrade, more torque, larger disc brakes. It comes with Porsche's PASM, the Porsche Active Stability Management Control. As soon as I turned a wheel in this thing, I was like, you know what? Like, this is for me. This, I really enjoy it. And while predominantly it is my wife who's going to be using the car, it's actually a family car. So this is a car that I too will also be driving. And of course, being the dad that I will be, I'm gonna want something that I'm still gonna enjoy driving, whether the kid's in it or not. And I drove this thing, and I drove it pretty swift, and I was just blown away by the ability of something with what looks like having high center of gravity. It just doesn't feel like it. It feels incredible. In fact, I was comparing it immediately with the RS6 because that's the car that was leaving in replacement of this car. Now, granted, in a straight line, it's not as fast as the RS6. RS6 is pushing out just over 600 horsepower, 605 horsepower. This is around about 440 with the performance pack. So it is down on power, but we got to remember, this isn't the predominant reason for this car. Yes, we want it to be agile and dynamic, but we're going to have a little baby, and we don't want to give it whiplash from day one. So it has enough performance for the dad to enjoy himself when maybe the kid isn't in the car. If I want to immerse myself in a full driver's experience, let's face it, this isn't necessarily the car that I'm going to pick. But as in terms of a whole package, with something that ticks all of the boxes, this is really leaning towards what I imagined. Now, speaking of what I imagined, I've never had to imagine this scenario ever before. I mean, I've never really had the need for any back seats, really. It's nice to have it from a practicality side of things, but it's never been essential. Now it's essential, and is the boot. Now, the dealership, so Anthony, who actually sold me my Porsche GT3, has been amazing. So Anthony at Stratstone, he actually brought down a McCann demonstrator for me and my wife to drive, which was very, very cool. But it wasn't until I opened the boot and realized that he'd put his own baby gear inside for us to see how it all fits, that I was like, man, now that is extra level salesman detail. He's very clever, but it's also like legit informative demo of this car. This is stuff I never had to think about before. Like things like ISOFIX in the back. I'm gonna have to be dealing with baby seats. Baby seats! So you might be wondering, you know, what does this mean for the channel? Well, if anything, you know, friends and family have been like, you know, are you gonna take a step back? You've got this baby now. My eyes, it's actually the opposite. I've got this baby now, or I've got this baby coming now, which means if anything, I'm gonna have to turn it up even further. I've got somebody else that relies on me. This has never been a factor in my life before. So for me, I actually wanna up the game. So there's gonna be developments coming on the channel soon where we can up the game together. I wanna be able to provide you guys with more content off the back of the F12 TDF drive, more quality content. I would love to bring videos like that to you more regularly. So there's things coming which I'm hoping will sort of bolster this channel and sort of grow the community even stronger, because all of a sudden I'm going to be supercar dad. Now, not that I'm going to be parading my child across the internet anytime soon, but I would be interested to hear from you guys if you want to see that side of things in terms of the dad's experience of living with cars. I'm not sure if the supercar dad thing has ever been done before. Once again, never anything I've ever had to research, but all of a sudden I'm going to be putting a seat in a TDF. Now, I've discovered that the TDF doesn't have ISOFIX, so there's different setups and arrangements if you do want to take a child along in that kind of car. Now, the kid isn't going to be in the car straight away. Super little young baby, not due until the end of January, and even then, let's face it, I'm not going to be sticking it in a pretty intense supercar anytime soon. But that journey will take place, and I'd love to hear from you guys to see if you would like to see an element of that. Don't worry, this is not going to become a baby channel by any stretch. But ultimately, this is a new part of my life, and I do, to a degree, share my life with you guys, and I'm wondering, you know, how much of it would you like to see? So, comments below. I'd love to know. There's a whole new world. Now, a little bit about the car. I've actually had this car for 2 months now. I haven't announced it, obviously, because I was waiting to save it for the baby announcement. McCann Turbo Performance, no less. Now, once again, something else that ticked the box for me, and I know I talk about this all the time, twin clutch gearbox in a car like this. My first McCann experience, and this is weird how things kind of come around at full circle. I did a Porsche experience day at Silverstone. So Porsche have their own sort of Silverstone Experience Center there, where if you're a Porsche owner or a prospect, you can go and experience the Porsche range on various different handling circuits, track, off-road, etc. And it was the first time that I'd driven a McCann there. Now, you know, I always bang on about gearboxes and how great gearboxes are. And then I drove a platform like this, which is this four-wheel drive, practical, 5-seater, big boot, by convention, fairly large car, but not too big, importantly, for the wife. And I was blown away by its handling. We took it on a handling circuit. The change of direction in this thing is incredible. It's still, I mean, okay, it's not the last word in steering feel, but you know what the front wheels are doing. But the gearbox together, now what I love, if you put this thing into Sport Plus, the suspension stiffens up, it gets sort of taut on its toes, steering weight feels weightier as a result of those changes in the dampers, and of course the valves in the exhaust open up. So if we drop it down a few cogs, on the way that this thing reacts, it's already, yeah, it pulls, man. Listen to it. Oh wow, it's so good. And when you anchor on the brakes, I love how all of the weight transfers on that front, because you can really turn it in under braking still. This is something I've never experienced from a 4x4 B4, but just the way it goes, it's got such a thick swell of torque. Now I want to which has been applied to the Macan. So when you read the words Porsche and turbo, you quite rightly associate it with the Porsche Turbo, which is famously applied in the platform, which is the 911 Turbo. Now, in the 911 platform, Porsche apply the use of a turbo in a very different way. It is all about just raw, pure speed, massive pace gathering waft. In this car, it's weird because you approach it and you read Porsche Turbo and you think, wow, this is going to be a similar performance application to a 911 Porsche Turbo. But after a few miles in it, you realize that the turbo application in this is very different to that in a 911 Turbo. Turbo in this makes it just absolutely effortless to drive. It just has such an ease about it, the way that it goes down the road. And I've likened this to other cars in the past, which are heavily turbocharged, but from the luxury sector. So take a Rolls-Royce, for example, the Phantom, which has the V12 in it. That, once again, heavily turbocharged engine, but the application of that turbo just makes it a very effortless, easy drive. And I've likened it to as if there's a magnet on the front of the car and there's a magnet on the other side of the road just drawing you down the road. That's kind of how this thing feels. You look down and you've built this momentum with like absolutely no effort at all. And then look, you can turn it in on corners like this and it just eats tarmac. It's so cool. What I'm not used to is having the agility in a car like this. You walk over to it and of course you approach it with a very different mindset that you're gonna get in this thing and chill and kind of take it easy. But as soon as you interact with the brakes, which bite wonderfully, you change down with that twin clutch gearbox, which if you've ever experienced a Porsche twin clutch gearbox, it appears that it doesn't matter what it's in, it's incredible. And then at the same time, you literally have the pram in the back. Not that I've had to experience that just yet, but that's what this thing's all about. So yes, that's why we bought a Porsche Macan Turbo Performance, and the RS6 is going. That's also one of the reasons why I kind of don't mind. It's such a new chapter in my life. Everything's new. Once I was sat in this car and I wrapped my head around the purpose of why I've got it, everything changed. You know, I was like, okay, I have to think about this as not for performance reasons. This is to ferry my child around the world. I mean, I say the world. Hopefully I get on some road trips at some point. Let's see. Of course, there will be more specific content coming on the Macan Turbo soon, but this is more of a sort of, hey, by the way, update. As colossal as it is, yeah, I can run over the full specs and show you much more of the outside of the car soon. But right now, there's this mind-blowing moment that's going on, which I kind of felt the need to share with you guys. So, as always, leave your comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I shall see you next time for some non-baby related news, and we're back to the usual programming schedule. Ciao! Makes joining the motorway speed. Like at that speed it makes that noise, which by convention is pretty steady really. Anyway, welcome back to the F12 TDF. It's been awesome, man. I've been back home for much longer than I have on average. Like this year traveling wise has been ridiculous, which is why the first drive video took so long to film. By the way, first drive video, what did you think of it? Comment below. I really wish that I could create sort of a higher level of quality content more regularly. Annoyingly, it's quite expensive and time consuming, but the results I think are really cool, and just the process of doing it is very enjoyable. So hopefully we can create some higher quality content in the future. But anyway, today is very significant. So whenever I commit to a car and buy something, in this case the F12 TDF, I love to immerse myself in as many aspects of the brand and the history and the context of the car as to what makes it significant and special. What makes this car special is its history. Not only is the car itself fantastic, but the history of it and where the name TDF came from, for me, is a super important part of this car. So today, I'm heading down to a supercar dealership called DK Engineering. It just so happens that they have an original 250 TDF in their showroom for me to go and have a look at. To give it some context, these things are ultra rare and hyper expensive. So it's going to be an honor to be able to put this modern day interpretation side by side with the original 250 TDF and find out what other amazing cars those guys have got in stock. So here we are, and I'm here with James from DK Engineering. Now, if you guys watched the first drive video of the F12 TDF, I did mention the significance of the name TDF comes from a very special car. It just so happens that we're standing next to that very car right now. Now, nobody is in a better position to tell us about the significance of this car than James himself. So, dude, first of all, pleasure to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thanks for coming.
It's awesome. I'm not sure if you guys have seen these guys online. I've been following their journey for the last few years. They've always got some phenomenal photos on Instagram of the kind of cars they deal with. I'll stick a link below to their page. But until then, run us through this car, man. I mean, for me, I'm actually getting goosebumps seeing my car parked next to something so incredibly special.
Yeah, so I mean, this is where it started. Before this, they had the 250 long wheelbase Berlinetta, which one of those won the Tour de France. So after that, the cars they built following that were called the Tour de France. So this is one of the very first cars. In fact, it is the first car, in my opinion, to leave the factory called a Tour de France or a 250 GT Tour de France.
Ridiculously cool.
Yeah.
So we're stood next to what we believe is the very first car.
Yeah, if you ask me, I would say this is. I mean, I've seen other cars go through auction and they call the earlier Berlinettas Tour de France in inverted commas, but for all intents and purposes, this was the first car called a 250 Tour de France. It's a 14 Louvre, so there were less than 10 of these built, and this is actually the very first one. So this is the car that if you look at in the Pininfarina book at the shot of a 14 Louvre Tour de France, this is the car before it had the stripe put on it, because that was put on it before it went to the first owner of the car in the States. But yeah, so this is, I think, the first.
Fantastic. So earlier on, you were telling me that while the car itself is special, you guys from DK also have quite a long history with this specific car.
Yeah. I mean, the early history of the car is amazing. It was owned by a guy called Tony Paravano, who's one of the sort of original California racing car guys. He always had racing cars, or out racing every weekend. And he owned this in the 50s, so as a new car it was delivered to him with the stripe as you see it today, absolutely as you see it today in this spec. And it was raced a couple of times before he had to part the country and left California, and never to be seen again as a result of a tax scandal. I'm not quite sure what the whole story is, but it's quite a famous story. And then later on, the car was owned by Walt Disney. So this was actually, if you've ever watched Herbie the Love Bug, this is the car that was in the film. The baddie, so to speak, drives this car, and Herbie falls in love with the other car, and that is this car, and it looked exactly as it is today. A few years later, it was sold to one of the team, so probably a production manager or something like that. And his son famously took the car out one night for a drive in Beverly Hills, over-revved it, blew it up, left it at the side of the road. So this car actually was at the side of the road for 2 weeks, just left as an abandoned old Ferrari. By that time, I think this was probably the early 60s.
Right, okay.
And it just didn't have the value that we see in them today. And it was bought by a guy eventually who wanted to restore it. So fast forward to the 70s, and the car was taken apart. And then the restoration wasn't properly started or continued until 1993, when my father bought the car from a very close friend in the States. And when we got the car, I remember I was quite young, but we got the car and everything was wrapped up in newspaper in 1973.
So it was literally in bits?
Absolutely in bits. Everything was original. Everything was there. It was just a part. And it was a California car. It had been in Arizona following California for those 20 years that it was owned by a friend of ours. Really? So it was an amazing restoration because it was super, super original. And a lot of these cars in the 70s, 80s and 90s, they might have had unsensitive restorations, or they might have been raced and crashed and damaged, but not this car. And one of the things that my father always says is He even put the original exhaust back on it. It was that original. And that's unheard of when you're restoring an old car like this.
Absolutely.
So we had it for a few years. He showed it. Well, he famously raced it on a Saturday, took it to a concours on the Sunday, and won the concours, which was pretty cool.
Man, the story of this car just keeps on going. So many layers.
So we sold it in the late 90s, and it went to the States with one owner. And it came back to Europe about 10 years ago, and a great friend and client of mine said, I really want a 14 Louvre Tour de France, but it's got to be a really, really good one, because they were racing cars, quite a few of them have a bit of a mixed, very difficult history. And I said to him, well, there are two really, really great cars, so let's go for one of those. And the story of this one, I think, really touched him. He loved the originality of it and the purity of it. So we chased it and eventually managed to buy it. And we gave it another restoration then just to refresh it, but again everything was retained. So in my opinion, this is the most original 14 Louvre Tour de France there is. It's the first Tour de France as well. It's a great car. It's a great car, and the current owner's been really using it to the way it should be, just enjoying it, showing it to people, and
so it actually gets used.
It gets used. I mean, it's not, it won't be taken out in the rain and things like that, but
for sure.
But it's it was at Salon Prix Day last year where it won the owner's choice in the concours there. So it was just a concours for just Ferrari owners to celebrate 70 years of Ferrari. So each owner got to choose a car, and this won by like a landslide victory. Obviously, so these are the Louvres that we keep talking about. So there are 14 on this car, which identify it to be rare and special. So this is a 14 Louvre Tour de France, which means it has 14 Louvres in the rear sail panel, as they call it. And then after this, there were about 35 cars that had 3 Louvres and about 30 cars that had single Louvres. Yeah.
Interesting. And how about the interior? Was this the original theme?
It was, yeah. So when we got the car in the mid 90s, the trim was out of it, but all the original trim was there. So we were able to retrim it then, absolutely as it was. So this sort of really curious combination of the cream and the blue is how it was, and the stripe on the dash as well, which is unique to this car.
That is.
It was under
unique.
It's actually very impractical because you get a reflection on the windscreen.
Yeah.
But someone had painted it satin black over the top.
Okay.
And so when we stripped the paint off back then, we found this stripe underneath. So when we've restored it this time, we've just made sure it's absolutely as it was the day it arrived in America.
So in contrast to the TDF of today, do you know the engine and horsepower that is in this car now?
Yeah, so this is a 3-litre V12. So it's actually the engine that Ferrari used pretty much from day one, right up until the Daytona. The basis of it is a very similar design for the majority of the cars they built. They had some quirky one-offs and things. Sure. Some of the racing cars had 4 cylinders and stuff, but the 250 V12 is really what they had for certainly most of the 1950s, right up to the 250 short wheelbase in 1960. So it's a 3-litre V12. These earlier engines are more torquey than powerful. So a later short wheelbase engine, for example, would probably have about 290 horsepower, whereas this is probably about 260. Nice. But as an engine on the road, it's actually really nice. It's it's all about torque.
And of course, the car's so light.
It's an all-aluminium body.
Anyway,
it's a strong, heavy chassis, but everything else is lightweight. And that's why the cars did really well in period. That's why they won events like Tour de France, which was on mainly on public roads across France.
The race went on for like 10 days, right? Yeah. It was road and track.
Yeah. So they would race across the country to a racetrack, to then do a race, to then race elsewhere. And as you say, sometimes between 6 and 9 days, and that's why the Ferraris did so well, because they were
it's hardcore endurance racing.
And they were built to last.
And let's not forget the roads in the 50s were not like
exactly. I mean, you think we've got bad roads, imagine what they were like then.
Unbelievable.
Which is when you look at the speeds that some of these guys got up to in the period, when Sterling Moss won Vanilla Emilia in the mid 50s, his average speed was 99 miles an hour, which actually, if you think about that,
that would be tricky now.
Impossible
to do it then. Well, I'm
going to go for
to do it then. It's just once again gives me goosebumps. Just
miles.
Thinking about it is incredible.
So the Ferraris always did well on those sorts of events because they were strong, durable cars. They weren't necessarily the lightest. They weren't necessarily the quickest around the track, but they lasted. And it was always about reliability. And Enzo was famous for saying that you buy the engine and the rest of the car comes with it. And that was very true. But because of his amazing relationship with great design houses like Pininfarina, they came out with these beautiful designs as well. So I think he was lucky in that sense, that the guys that he worked with were the best at what they did in the time.
Okay, so now we've got these two cars back to back. This is an incredible moment. I wasn't joking earlier on when I said that I had goosebumps. This is the kind of view you do not see every day. It's a distinctly above average Monday. So let's start with the obvious comparisons. Now, James was telling us earlier what makes this car significant is the 14 louvers here. Distinctly out louvered on the TDF, but you can very much see where the DNA has come from these two cars. I'd be fascinated to be in the design studio when Ferrari are designing the sort of modern day equivalent of these classic cars, just to see how much of a comparison they draw between each car. Overall, we can see that they're obviously front-engined V12s, but let's think about the details which would correspond in a modern day interpretation. These vents here, for example, on the original could well be interpreted as the equivalent of these vents here on the TDF. One of my favourite features of the TDF is how flared the rear arches are. It really does have big hips, this really strong haunch. If we just conveniently pan back to the original, you can see where that DNA continues through in the car. There's a very defined hip on this car, it's just sculpted out alongside the louvers. Obviously the original is quite dainty in comparison. I mean, you wouldn't believe the size difference. These two are parked back to back and we've lined them up as best as we can, and that's how much more the F12 TDF is sticking out beyond the width of the original. It's such a big car, but that's what made these cars so great. It was threading them down narrow streets of France in the 50s. Can't say the same for the new car. It's absolutely huge. So if you're familiar with modern day Ferraris, particularly the front engine cars, you'll know that at the back they have this luggage compartment with matching straps in order to put your luggage and tie it down securely. That is something that has been carried over from historic Ferraris, none more so. Look, there is a direct link here with the DNA of this car. They've got these gorgeous leather straps purposely there to hold your luggage on this rear shelf. To be able to just pan back and have these two car doors open back to back. Look at this. One there, to be able to just jump back in and see the modern day interpretation right there is such a special experience. I also really love the fact that it has an absolutely huge grille, just like the F12 TDF. If you compare this with the standard F12, the grille on this looks like it's about to eat you.
So, seamless transition. Yeah. Look who it is. Do you remember when I had the incredible honour of driving the McLaren F1 across Europe last year? Luke followed us around in the 1M, which you still have?
I still have.
Still have that car?
Yeah.
We were just talking actually when I arrived, there seems to be a disproportionate amount of 1Ms here.
Yeah, there's about three on site.
Still one of my all-time favourite cars. It's the car that I regret selling the most.
We've got one for sale. It's white.
Cool. Mine was white.
There we
with
go.
Black wheels.
There we go.
Oh, God damn it, I knew this was going to get expensive. Anyway, speaking of expensive, behold!
Okay, so when you walk into a room like this, you never really know where to begin. So let's start from the start. Now, interestingly, what we spotted here is there are two 599 GTOs. You can just see the other one there with the stripe on the bonnet. It's rare enough to get two 599 GTOs in the room. Even rarer when they're both painted in the same color, which in the case of these two is Bianco Fuji, which is kind of like a pearl. It's almost like a mother of pearl type of pearlescent white. In certain lights it looks silver. To have two in the same room, very cool. Okay, let's just go and check out the interior on this. Wow, the pearlescent effect on this is incredible. Wow, look at this. Look at it. It's amazing how this is just a generation away, just one generation from the F12 TDF, and all of the instrumentation is such a different feel. Also, interestingly, in the TDF and also the Speciale, Ferrari introduced this sort of instrument cluster stalk where they've got exactly the same buttons, still shrouded in satin carbon, but it comes off this really cool stalk. It's really interesting seeing how it's evolved even just from one generation. It's very special to be around a car like this. And something else that I'm not sure if the camera's doing it justice, the size of these things. The width of this car is absolutely colossal. And here's the second. So this is also Bianco Fuji. but we're now right-hand drive, one owner from new, 599 GTO. This one's spec'd with the harnesses. Yeah, this room is actually ridiculous. At first glance, you just look at it and think, lots of supercars in the room. There's two 8Cs and two 599 GTOs here. Granted, this is a rarer 8C Spider. These things make the most glorious V8 soundtrack. So to be able to take the roof off and have some of that direct earhole port injection is awesome. So 8C Spiders, they actually only made 500 of them, and I love the Italian attention to detail there. Look at that, it actually looks like quite random placement really for something to be embroidered, but just on the side bolster of the driver's seat you've got that little Alfa Romeo badge. It's really cool. Cool story about this, 550 Barchetta, they only made 448 of these cars. Now interestingly, this has been fitted with the upgraded high-speed roof. So the original roof that came with this car kind of was, shall we say, a little bit unreliable at higher speeds. It was predominantly designed to be driven with the roof off it, but if you did want to put the roof on and go fast, this roof was made, which allows you to go about 130 miles an hour with the canvas roof. But one of the owners of this exact car wanted to use the car all the time at high speed, so he commissioned a special carbon fiber roof to also get fitted to this car. And as such, this particular model has 3 roofs for one car. Pretty crazy stuff. So of course all the cars in here are special, but it's not until you dig beneath the surface that you find out there's some really special stuff in here. This 575 Maranello, for example, is a 1 of 9 cars because it's a manual and also the HGTC package, which means it's the handling package with the fancy wheels. Very cool, very rare. One of the great things about open gated gearboxes, they make this awesome reassuring clicking noise. Look. Such a reassuring sound. It's like you've slammed a rifle bolt in and you're about to fire off your V12. Super special. And behind door number 2, this place is unbelievable. We're going to show you around the other half of DK Engineering after this, but the car, there's a 250 GTO there, casually parked. This is quite special in front of us here. This is the exposed chassis of the 250 TDF, or should I say of a 250 TDF. So what used to happen back in the day was that Ferrari would build engine and chassis, and then they would outsource the design of the exterior to a design house like Pininfarina, and they would put on the beautiful body shell, which is where the Pininfarina collab with Ferrari stayed up until recently, when Ferrari brought it all in-house, and that's why the 812 Superfast looks a little bit different than you might expect it would, evolving from the F12 Berlinetta. Now have a look at this. This is absolutely gorgeous. In contrast to the modern day supercars that we've just been checking out, this is an ex-Beryl Reid Aston Martin DB5 convertible. Now for those of you guys who don't know who Beryl Reid is, and you're scratching your head thinking, who is he talking about? She was a famous actress. It was in her ownership for quite a long time, and what's unique about this car is that it was restored by the Aston Martin factory. So this is an official Aston restoration. I'm not sure if the camera's doing this thing justice, but it's absolutely gorgeous. Look at these headrests. This was a factory option. I've never actually seen these, but they're super dished. Looks like I just want to kick back in there, have my head nuzzled between this plush leather, have the top down and just cruise down some gorgeous Alpine road. I actually had the honor of driving down to Le Mans this year together with Aston Martin in one of their works DB6 cars. Actually, the sun was shining and all I wanted to do was experience it with the roof down. Unfortunately, we didn't have a convertible, but seeing this now has confirmed everything that I was hoping for with a DB convertible. Granted, this is a DB5. I was on a DB6, not entirely dissimilar, but to see one with the roof down, ultimate classic cruiser. So interestingly, drawing comparisons with classic cars and the TDF, if anyone was wondering why the TDF has this like weird vintage inspired fuel cap, you can see that it comes off similar cars like this 250 GTO that just so happens to be sat casually in this showroom.
And welcome to the next venue, the largest venue, DK Storage. So not only do they sell and restore incredible classic cars and sell modern supercars, but they now have this modern supercar storage warehouse, and it's absolutely colossal. One of my favorite games to play here is Guess the Supercar. I mean, look at this place. It's just full of cars under covers. This corner in particular is pretty interesting. So at a guess, we're looking at a 599 GTO. I'm gonna go, there's two LaFerraris here, just casually side by side. Obviously, the shape itself is a dead giveaway, but also it's on trickle charge here for the hybrid unit. And I think there is a row of 7 or 8 F40s there, as you do. Pretty casual stuff. Lamborghini Aventador, another 599 GTO, Enzo, that one's obvious. Enzo, F50, and then down here there's a row of 6 Speciales, which all of a sudden makes them feel not so Speciale. So there you have it. That is my time at DK Engineering over. It's been incredible. As I mentioned, I've had my eye on these guys for quite some time, seeing their adverts and also following their journey on Instagram. And I always knew that I would come here one day. It wasn't until my friend Luke started working here that I got the invite to come and check out a very special car. Never did I believe that I would bring my own TDF to put it back to back with an original 250 TDF. And the insight from James has been invaluable. And hopefully for you guys, it's given you some context as to the lineage of that car and why the modern day TDF is super special. So as always guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Ciao.